So I left the old, or not the old, the new logo and screenshot up and realized it only just before we went live. I'm like, oh, hold on. So yeah, hopefully by Saturday, my wife and I will be able to put up the new website, which will have links for Serial Papers, which will have links for the new YouTube channel, which will have these. I should have two or three pre-recorded videos ready to go, so y'all can share. And like I said, I don't really promote this channel. I like the fact that it's small. I could easily see a day where maybe it becomes too big, right? So I would like to keep it as small and intimate as we can. Serial Papers in their hand. Y'all better like, share, subscribe, and send that out to everybody, because we're gonna fix the world. And my mic is like over here. You can tell when things are busy. So anyway, so hopefully Sunday morning I'll be able to confirm that Serial Papers is fully functional, and we'll have some videos up the whole 9 yards. It'll be a lot of fun. It'll be a page or a channel, a YouTube channel that y'all can send to people. It's like, hey, if you got questions on this stuff, go listen to this guy here, this nut job at an art desk. But y'all keep this to ourselves because I like y'all. So okay, I'm gonna answer Cheese Freak's question. I was planning to do it anyway, but thank you for reminding me because I completely forgot. Because honestly, I think tonight's going to be a little short. Unfortunately, I just got a lot to do, but also because the section that we're talking about is kind of short. So, you know, we've hit the narrative part of Abraham's journey. So there's a lot to cover, but there's some important things to talk about. So a lot of it's going to be more archaeology than anything else. So, like I said, unfortunately, got a lot to do. So let's do a shout out to everyone who's in chat today. We have Cheese Freak, Ginger Snap, Tom Paul Cajun, Susan Robertson, Gene Hudson, the infamous Titan, and I think that's it for the time being. Oh, and Bob's here from Van Buren Variety. So, yeah, when I say short, it means it's going to go longer than we're supposed to. So I'm. It's not that I'm lying. Mary H, greetings. So I'm just saying I'm going to try and make it short, but I make no promises. But if it is short, you understand why. So let's go back to Cheese Freak's question. So Jeff Bezos is basically trying to make full transition into Dr. Evil status with his rocket launch, and of course everyone's like it is making the joke, of course, that it looks like a phallus. From for those of you who saw Austin Powers, you know what the gag is, right? And so a lot of people have been doing that meme, and some people are like, man, we need to tax the rich more, so we can do, like, do you think he actually paid for that out of pocket? I mean, he starts a company for that kind of thing. But that's all aside. So Cheese Freak, though, had an interesting comment, and I have an answer for it, but I need to pull one image up real quick. And unfortunately, here we are. My mic is right in front of my keyboard here, so it's a little hard. Okay. So her question was, it looked like an obelisk. Does this mean something? Does this have a higher, are we supposed to be seeing something? So actually, let me pull up let me pull up Jeff Bezos's spaceship. Bezos. Now that pulled up pretty quick. Okay, we'll go with it. Blue Origin. It's honestly, if anything that should really freak us out, it's the name. Anyway, I don't know, it just seems weird to me. So let me go ahead and share this. just so we can have the same conversation. And we'll go with the big one. Share screen and Chrome tab, Bezos rocket. Okay, so this is it, right? It's actually a pretty standard rocket, sort of standard intercontinental ballistic missile here, but then it has a more domed, larger capsule on top. Again, giving it the overall gag design. But as Cheese Freak Ginger has pointed out, it's not really. I mean, it's round-ish. It is sort of like a cylinder for the body, but it's also not. Like there is clearly sort of an edge on this. Like it's not necessarily truly a cylinder. And that's interesting, right? Like, why is it not that? Why is it so her point is it looks like an obelisk. Well, my answer to she's saying, does this maybe have something to do with the Tower of Babel? Now, why Tower of Babel? Oftentimes it's because most people, when they talk about the Tower of Babel, right? There it is. They go to one of these famous, it's a famous painting, right? And it's often depicted as this winding staircase going up. And some even have them going quite high and quite tall. So, it's almost a again, sort of phallic shape going up, kind of a thing. So is any of this connected to the Tower of Babel? Is it an obelisk? What's happening here? Well, as far as the question of whether or not this has anything to do with the Tower of Babel, I would say this. This is the Tower of Babel. It's a ziggurat. We know this. We found the foundation of it. It's a ziggurat. I mean, that's what the Tower of Babel is. So from this, I would say no. As far as it having anything to do with the Tower of Babel. Because the Tower of Babel was a ziggurat. They came in different flavors, but you could that's not where I wanted to go. Close that. There we go. But again, this is what they were more sort of very early sort of pyramidal structures. Some people would call them. We'll even equate them to the step pyramids. There's some significant differences, but essentially that's it. But that being said, is there something else going on? Is it an obelisk? Well, here's the problem. Or when I say, yes, well, yeah, actually they did. Well, they used a South American style. I just saw Susan Robertson's comment. I will leave it off the screen. But yes, they use the South American style pyramids for their thing. Man, I can't unsee her comment. Anyway, here's the thing. In the fact that it's phallic shaped, isn't an obelisk. I mean, you could make that connection because technically the obelisks are designed to be a phallic shape. For Horus, whose member was removed in Egyptian mythology. So if you want to kind of say that maybe there's some overlap there for some reason, that maybe it's just sort of that it's maybe a subtle indicator, you could make that argument. I kind of default to Occam's razor, which is there's only so many things that work, right? And so okay, so Cheese Freak, let me come back to that because let me finish this because that's actually an interesting point. There's only so many shapes that work, right? Air resistance is a thing, whether you like it or not. There's only so many shapes that will move at the speeds that you need to escape to reach escape velocity or low Earth orbit. You can only have so many. There's only so many shapes that actually work for that. That's why jet fight, like the more advanced the jet fighters become, the more alike they all look. Well, it's because we're literally hitting like the point where everyone's trying to do the same thing, which is go as fast as you can in our atmosphere. Well, that has certain limitations, and so only certain shapes really kind of work. Same thing here. Like there's a reason atlatls and spears and arrows and missiles and rockets all kind of look alike. They're all trying to do the same thing. So I guess that does kind of tie into your question. It's like, well, hey, well, hold on, but it looks like an arrow trying to break. Well, it only looks like an arrow if you're going for the non-lethal kind of arrows, and those actually did exist. Their arrows came in many flavors, particularly during the Middle Ages. Lots of different shapes and designs. It depends on what you wanted to do. And they had some that were these large metal, essentially spheres. And the idea is that it would just break someone's collarbone, right? Well, so the F-16, no, this is, yeah, if you put a big enough engine on anything, you can make it fly. That is true. But the F-16 Falcon, the wings were so small on that. But again, that's a joke, and it's true to a point. But you're not going to, you actually want to make something that works. You're not going to make it a brick, right? Let's just be honest. Until we can figure out anti-gravity, we're just never going to be able to design something like that actually genuinely flies. I'm an Occam's razor kind of guy, right? It's like, well, why does it look like that? Because of what they wanted to do. There's, again, whenever I hear someone's like, well, why do we have all these phallic-shaped buildings? Well, because a vulva-shaped building would be a hole in the ground. I mean, it's like, what do you want us to do here? If you only have so much room, you go up. I mean, I'm sorry, that's just how this works. If you want to build a rocket that goes into space, you're not going to make it look like a moose with antlers. It's going to look like some kind of an obelisk, because an obelisk in many ways is doing similar ideas where it's going up. Now, that being said, an obelisk, it comes to a pointed tip. This one has a very oddly shaped edge, but again, that's also the capsule that they were in. The capsule descends. Well, what should strike you as an overt middle finger from Jeff Bezos is Jeff Bezos. Like, that's he's the biggest middle finger of all. But that's a whole other kettle of fish. I don't want to get into that. But so the question here, though, was it odd? Is it an odd design? Actually, I think it is. Like, I get what he was going for. Like the Virgin rocket, what they're doing is they want to use that large mothership to get you high enough in the atmosphere so that you use a smaller rocket to get you into the atmosphere, to get you into the lower stratosphere. So you've actually left you've actually left Earth technically. And then you fly back down. Bezos is kind of going old school, where it's like, it's just a heavy payload rocket, and you just put the capsule on top, sort of like we did with our with the moon, with our lunar rockets. There was the same design, same idea basically, but because they weren't going as high, they didn't have to carry as much equipment, because they weren't having to do the actual they would just had the capsule, right? Because when you got to remember, when we went to the moon, you had your main rocket. It got you into basically lower orbit. It ejected, and then you had an entire space capsule that had a lunar lander at the end of it, and it had its own power, and that got you to the moon. You dropped the lunar capsule off on the moon. It hadn't have enough fuel to come back up. They'd meet back up, and then the spaceship would take I think they would jettison lunar rover or the lunar lander at that point, and then they would use that to get you back to Earth. Then just the capsule comes down. They Bezos is bypassing all that and just doing the capsule, so it doesn't have to be as heavy or as large. So it looks a little weird, you know. Um, right. So exactly, it's about. So again, it's not the shape. There's a lot of things going on. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things where, and so let me say this: I do think, and we're going to have an interesting conversation on Monday on Texas show. Um, about it kind of has a minor overlap here. That may be why I'm thinking this way. Not everything is something, but the idea of it being an overt middle finger, I also don't think it's necessarily wrong because there's a lot of things he could have done with his cash. Now, I'm of the opinion that I like the space race because we need. I'm sorry, I'm a capitalist. I believe that if we're going to go to space, we need companies to do it. Governments are never going to make that efficient. So I'm okay with it. What I have a problem with, and where I think the middle finger is coming from, is Jeff Bezos is basically government funded at this point because the government shut down artificially all these other things that were his competition, and really a lot of his cash is coming from hey Brunson is coming actually from the government from with server space. Like, so I mean, there's some other stuff going on that I think saying that Bezos' spaceship was a middle finger to people who want to, I would say, work in the real world. I think it was. I just don't think it was necessarily as intentional. I think the reason it was designed that way was function more than anything else. I don't think there was any deep message. I just think Bezos is what happens when you have a good idea and you're able to do some things that are right, and then you have the government come up and basically make you the number one man because the government decides to own you. That's what happened. So anyway, but that's it. Like I said, I don't see it as, but beyond that, I don't see it as anything other than that. I don't see there being necessarily tie-ins to the Tower of Babel or anything like that. Like I'm not like, again, even the shape is it an obelisk only in the very strictest sense that it's of its overall shape. Like I said, I don't think any of that really is the issue. I think it's more of a sociological thing. And and this is a great point. Not every, so even what's his face, Freud himself said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? So okay, so Gene has a great point, right? But when the government owns someone, they're behind what they do. Not as much as we'd think. I think the government owning people, it's not what we think. Again, it's sort of like the whole Pizzagate thing. I think Pizzagate was disinformation to make us miss the obvious, which is that it was true. What I mean by that is we live our lives and we think, and we don't realize it, but a lot of how we view the world, right? Exactly, Mary H. But so much of our perception of how the world works actually does come from movies and what we in our entertainment. What we even when we know better, our brains don't know better necessarily, and so we come to a lot of conclusions. And so it's easier for us to think that there's this super dark, super secret organization that has secret tunnels and James Bond pizza shops, right? And like it's easier to believe that than to believe that everyone knows it's happening and it's very public, but no one actually talks about it because they don't want to get in trouble. And they don't want to have other people, come down on them for it. That's what we don't believe. We don't believe that people who work for CNN and NBC and CBS and Fox and the government, senators, congressmen, captains of industry. We don't believe that some dude could just be running around with presidents and CEOs and senators and movie stars, right? Um, that he could exist out and open and be providing underage prostitutes for all these wealthy people, and just have everyone go, eh, and just leave it alone and just shut up about it. And when it does show up and someone's like, hey, I'm gonna talk about it on the news shuts it down because they don't want to talk about it. I mean, that's the part we don't believe. So that's why it's like, that's why disinformation is so easy sometimes. Is it's easier to believe this James Bond villain world than basically what the reality is, which is that people suck and are evil, and we are willing to turn a blind eye to terrible, awful things so long as it doesn't make our lives harder. I mean, that's the real problem here, isn't it? And I think we'll find in a lot of cases, like, that's why it was like the whole I don't want to get off on this tangent, like the whole UFO thing. I'm actually going to be recording an episode for a friend. I'll have the link once I have it. Actually, I think it may be a radio station. I may have to do a serial papers on it. You know what? I'll do a serial papers on it. But just so we know, like the whole UAP thing, yeah. My view is that it was worded in such a way as to make it, as to lead people to come to the conclusion that they're aliens. Like, that's why it was written. But I also don't necessarily believe that the government has necessarily reverse engineered all of these super secret, UFO crashes that we've got little green men in a hangar. I don't think that's necessarily real either. I call it the Stargate universe, right? Where you go and you watch Stargate. Like the first 5 seasons, they're just using that Stargate to jump from world to world. But then by like season 5 or 6, they're like, hey, we've got all this technology. Let's start building aircraft, and they have this whole fleet of ships that they've built, right? I don't think that's where we are. I don't think the government actually has. I think a lot of the stories that have come out is actually disinformation. And again, I should probably I'll do an entire episode on this because there's a lot to talk about here. But I think a lot of I think that Linda Moulton Howell and most ufologists who have, and you know what? I'll even say this. Even L.A. Marzulli, I love to have him on the show. I love to talk to the guy. Man's a hero to me. But anytime I hear, well, we have government insiders, I think disinformation, all of it. I think the problem is we have to remember DOD, military intelligence, CIA, NSA, and a bunch of places that we don't even know about. They are at war with foreign intelligence agencies to hide what they're doing. The UFO crowd is a really, really interesting cover for a lot of our Black Works material. So I think they're all honest. Like I said, I love Marzulli. I think everyone's honest. I think they're doing their best. The problem is, I'm just distrustful of a lot of these insiders. Same thing with Nick Redfern. I think I question a lot of these insiders only because it seems like it would be real easy to manipulate, right? Foreign intelligence by having them, because here's the thing, believe it or not, foreign intelligence and our intelligence, they actually do pay attention to like cryptos and UFO, like, because they have a different view of the world. So they really are actually watching that stuff. So I can very easily see the U.S. military putting on one face, like, we don't know anything about this. This is all crap. to very much cover the fact that they do know stuff about this and that the phenomenon is real. But then they use that phenomenon to hide they know they can't do anything about the phenomena. So they're like, okay, let's just tamp it down, and we'll keep a lid on the phenomena for as long as possible. But then let's also use the people who we know aren't going to buy this lie. Let's use them to throw our enemies off so they don't know what's ours and what's theirs. See what I'm saying? So it's like I don't discount everyone because they've been a police officer or they've worked in the military or anything like that. But when I hear members of the military and they get the more elaborate the story, the more convoluted the story, the more spectacular the story, the more I'm going to question it. Only because we have to remember that information is power, knowledge is power, and the best trick the devil ever pulled was making people believe he wasn't real, right? So, just saying. Anyway, that's all I got. But yeah, like I said, I love Marzulli. I am going to try to get him on. He's not going to come on this show because we're not a show. We're just a Bible study. But I might be able to get him on Texas show. So I'd love to have him on Texas show. I love to talk to him for a few minutes and get his view on some stuff. But like I said, long story short is not everything is necessarily what we think, but it doesn't mean that it isn't a reminder that there is something there. I don't know if that means anything, but whatever. Anyway, we're 30 minutes into what was going to be a 45-minute show. Okay, so yeah, we're going along. So yes, actually, I have an announcement. I do have an announcement. I just realized I forgot to pull up the date. Let me do that. So tomorrow I've got a show with Tex on Brenda's channel. I think I don't have the link for that. Saturday the 21st of August. So that's where we know. Yeah. So that's then 1, 2, 3 weeks from now. On the 21st, we have on Saturday we're going to have Nathan on the show. I'm going to try. I haven't confirmed it yet, but I'm going to try and drive up on. So we may not have a show that Sunday, right? Which would be the 22nd. We may not have that show because I may be going up to pray with Jeff Stewart, on that day. If we do, I will let you know, and we'll put the time out there so y'all can be praying with us as well. But so the big announcement outside of the website, and then of course the Siru channel being active perhaps by Sunday, is that on the 21st, on Saturday, we're going to have a big show with Nathan. He can't come on Sundays, unfortunately. But that's good because we'll still be in the Sermon on the Mount at that point. But he's going to come on, and we're going to do Nathan, and we're going to just go through all the Apocrypha references. And Dr. Bob. Well, Nathan. Okay, who's Logan 1953? I think I'm missing that one. And unfortunately, Dr. Bob is unavailable for a while. So when he is available, I'd like to have him back on, but I don't know when he'll become available again. I'm just trying to think about who Logan may be. I may just be too tired. But yeah, but we will definitely have Nathan on the 21st. So that's something to look forward to, and that is a Saturday. It's going to run probably a couple of hours because we're going to go through all of the references and the quotes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to use that information for a later study as well. But we'll do that, and then once we wrap up the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to get into the feasts, and then we may come back and circle back to all the information that he got it. Oh, how is... I'm sorry, yes. Okay. I misread 1953's question. Because I was just talking about Nathan, our friend, right? Who's the who's into the Apocrypha and has really done research on that. I thought you meant that Nathan. I'm sorry. Now this all makes sense. Nathan, my son, is doing well. Logan, my nephew, is doing well. Everyone's doing well. Dr. Bob is in recovery. He's still recovering. He's got a long road ahead of him. But everyone right now is optimistic. Cautiously optimistic, but they are optimistic. He is home, and he is recovering in his at his home. So everyone right now is fine. And like I said, Nathan's actually doing very, very well. Logan, unfortunately with Logan, all I know is that he's doing well. But he's still going to need prayers. And again, Dr. Bob is recovering, but he is home. He is recovering from at home, so we're just gonna. They have him on a lot of medications, a lot of things he's trying to do. So, but yeah, that's everything. And let's keep Alan in prayer. Let's open in prayer, and then we will actually get to this very short, what was supposed to be a very short episode. It's just a story about Abraham in Egypt. So, I mean, there's not too much to talk about. Except I spent half an hour talking about Jeff Bezos' spaceship. I'll have the best questions. You really do. Oh, also, let's just pray for protection for Nick from that other show that's currently on hiatus. He's safe. He's well. Everything's fine. But we should definitely give him send a couple prayers for his protection while he is away. That's all I can say for now, unfortunately. Heavenly Father, we thank you and we praise you for all that you've done. Father, thank you for bringing us together, this weird and strange group of people that love you and want to do your will. I am happy to be counted among them, and I am just glad that you brought us together. We didn't find each other, you brought us together. I thank you that we can come before you and we can bring those things that burden our hearts. For those who are sick, like Dr. Bob, and Jeff, like Logan. For those who need protection, like Alan and Nick. And then for all of us, that we can ask for courage and wisdom. The courage and wisdom to live as you have called us, to do the things you have called us to do, to live as you have called us to live, to seek your will and not ours. Father, we thank you for all of these things, and we thank you that we can come to you now, read your word, and have your Spirit teach us something and bring us closer to you, so that we may be more like you, so we may be prepared for the days that are to come. I pray all these things in the name of your Son, Christ Jesus, in whom all things are possible. Amen. So, Genesis 12. Oh, saw some comments. Yes, MH1953 I have. But here's the thing. So y'all can always send... yes, thank you, Lamp of Light. Absolutely. Y'all can always send money to Alan. I send it at the end of the year, at the end of the month, just to so there's some time for him to get it. But feel free to send whenever. I keep it all off to the side until it's time to send it out. But there's no Yeah, you can send whatever. You don't need to worry about when it gets sent. But yes, it does. I always make certain I send it for enough time for him to get it by the end of the month. Usually, so here's the thing: it takes like 4 days for the transmission to really, for to go through. They're supposed to be. I keep saying this. Like, if I knew how to do it, I would create a new system of transference, to transfer money, because like some of these things, it would go faster, and I'd be happy to pay the charges, but they just won't let me do it to Africa. So we'll see what it is. MH 1953, it's fine. Like I said, just whenever you can, and whatever you can is perfectly fine. I'll take care of the rest. But for now, let's actually get to our text. So here's where we're at. We've done the proto-history, and we've done the Tower of Babel, and then the generations it takes to get to Abram. Abram's father has died, and now the Lord's come to Abram and is taking him. There's a poem that's from the Lord that basically is saying to go, right? So he goes with his. He departs Haran. He brings Sarah and Lot, his nephew, goes with him. And a lot of people point out that he's not. God doesn't tell Abram to bring Lot with him at all. He says for Abraham to go forth, and he even says from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. Lot was his relative. And a lot of people have known that Lot gets him into a lot of trouble on several occasions. So a lot of people point out that God did not intend Lot to go with Abram on this journey, and that Abram bringing him was a mistake. That he was not to have brought his nephew with him. He was supposed to leave his nephew in Haran. Now, I mention this only because I think there is not only validity to that comment and that line of thinking. I think there's a message there, which you can glean, and it's one that I've had a huge trouble, right, learning myself. This is to me more than anyone else. Good night, Susan. You have a good one. And that is, you can't always bring people with you, right? When you're called to go do something, sometimes you have to be the one to go do it. You can't always bring people with you. You can't, new opportunity opens in your life. You go to pursue it, and you're like, let me bring my friends with me. Let me bring my family with me to be a part of this new thing that we're doing, right? Sometimes it gets you into trouble because you bring those people, and those people hold you back because you're waiting. And sometimes you need to kind of leave people where they are. When sometimes God is calling you. Now, he's never going to call you from your wife or something like that. But it's like he's like, hey, no, I'm calling you to leave your family. You get up, you go. I'm not calling Lot. I'm calling you. And it does seem like God wants Abram to be separate. And he doesn't, and he does pay the price several times for this. And like I said, I got to learn that the most. So now we come to our actual text. It's chapter 12, verse 10. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. And it came about when he came near to Egypt that he said to Sarai his wife, see now, I know that you are a beautiful woman. And it will come about when the Egyptians see you that they will say, this is his wife, and they will kill me, but they will let you live. Please say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, that I may live on account of you. And it came about when Abram came into Egypt, the Egyptians saw the woman was very beautiful, and Pharaoh's officials saw her and praised her to Pharaoh. and the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. Therefore he treated Abram well for her sake, and gave him sheep and oxen and donkeys and male and female servants, and female donkeys and camels. The camel thing is going to be important in a second. But the Lord struck Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's wife. Then Pharaoh called Abram and said, "What is that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go." And Pharaoh commanded his men concerning him, and they escorted him away with his wife and all that belonged to him. So we see in this story a couple of interesting things. Firstly, for some archaeological background on that story, it is a lot of people have, some scholars have claimed that the story of Abraham has to be fake, and one of the reasons is because of the camels, the presence of camels. They would say that there is no evidence that the Canaanites living in Levant during the time of the early to middle Bronze Age actually had domesticated camels. Well, and so Abraham couldn't have possibly owned camels. He's listed as owning camels. Well, here's the problem. Abraham wasn't from the Levant, right? He traveled from Mesopotamia to the Levant, to the Canaanite lands. So probably brought camels with him. And B, as we see right here, some of the camels were given to him by the king or by the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And so, yeah, even if Pharaoh had, even if the Egyptians weren't necessarily all down with domesticating the donkey or camels at that point, though they were, we have discovered that. But even if they weren't, Egypt was still a massive power. They were trading with Mesopotamia. They would have gotten the camels from there. So again, just a little archaeology thing here. Some people say the story of Abraham is fake because Abraham has camels, but Canaanites didn't. Well, he wasn't a Canaanite. Like there's no problem. There's no there. What you usually have are scholars what you have often are scholars who aren't half as smart as they think they are. And so, like, my favorite one, right, is an argument that the Jews coming back into the land couldn't have been a real thing because all of the pottery that the Jews used, their textiles, they all just seemed like poorer, simpler versions of what the Canaanites had, which means they were really the same people group. To which I would point out, and they said the only thing that really separated these people was religion. Well, yeah, duh. That's the point. These were all the same people group. Of course, they made the same pottery. They had the same language, basically. They were the same people. What separated them was God. Like, you're not smart, dude. It's profoundly vexing sometimes. But another archaeological thing is this idea of killing men to take their wives, real thing in Egypt. In fact, what's funny is a lot of scholars in the past use that to say, well, clearly this is a fake story because it's repeated later, right? It must be a fake story because we don't have any records of it. Well, we do have records of it now. We found papyrus from the early to middle Bronze Age, which this practice happened. Also, it says that they escorted him out of Egypt. That's also something that we have found in texts from the early to middle Bronze Age period. So a lot of these things they have pointed to historically as evidence that the story of Abram wasn't real. We've got plenty of evidence that it was. There were camels. The wife thing looks to have been a thing, as is them actually escorting him out of Egypt. So now to Cheese Freak's question of, did Abraham, let me put this on the screen, but for those who are listening, did Abram actually allow his wife to be taken for a wife of the Pharaoh? I'm going to say yeah. In fact, that's actually, like, they don't give us a lot of detail here. And I think the reason for that is it's not really technically important, but this is where he says, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? He says, so he jumps down to verse 9. He said, so that I took her for my wife. Now here, he says, I took her for my wife. I'm sorry. Like, this text, we don't know what this means, right? The people say, we don't know exactly what it means. You're right. We don't know what it means, which means we don't know that nothing happened, but we don't know that nothing didn't happen either. Like, it seems like this was a big deal. And the problem is, we don't even know how he finds out and what this plague was. Like, let's again, this goes back to let's be real honest about this kind of a thing. We don't know what any of this means. It's because ultimately it's not important. This is not a textbook. It is a poetic book that's designed to teach us about God. Whatever it is, to Titan's point, it scared him. Something scared him. Now, is it possible that God intervened prior to anything happening? Yes. It is entirely possible that that essentially she took it, that he took her, and like things are going on, and they're like, okay, so what's going on? And that, there was no infidelity yet. That may have been entirely and so whatever happened, she enters the household, some bad things are happening, and somehow God intervenes and reveals to Pharaoh that that's his wife, or Abram's wife. Entirely possible, but we don't know that didn't happen. It is entirely possible that Sarai and the Pharaoh, like, she was straight up. Well, but see, so here's the thing, Titan. That's the whole point. Nothing happens. Well, let me phrase this. Nothing in the text. Everything that people have said about what happened with Sarai and Abram, right, is it's all mythology. Like, this is the text. Like, this is it, right? Like, this is all we got. Everything else is a Mishnah, right? And so a lot of people have written of like spirits coming, like they were in the bedchamber and a spirit shows up. There have been a lot of people who've written a lot of Mishnahs on this story. But the text, I read you the whole text right here. We heard the whole thing. It's literally, it's chapter 12, verse 10 through 20. And chapter 13, they've left Egypt and they're headed to the Negev. That's the entire text. There is nothing. Everything that people have said about this, again, I don't know what happened, but it's all from in their heads. It has nothing to do with the text. So, do we know what happened? No. Do we know what didn't happen? No. The real question is, why is it really, it's a character study. He was so afraid of these people that he literally was willing to let his wife be taken by another man. Like, what was he going to do? Leave? Like, that's it. Like there's a lot of questions I got about this whole story. It's like, what's your out here, Abram? What's your plan? Okay, great. So the Pharaoh's got your wife. He's given you things for him, or for Sarah. What's your out? Like, how do you leave and go back to the land God promised you with your wife? I don't see an out. And this is where sometimes the lack of story is the story. This seems like a failure on his part on a lot of levels. I mean, hold on. All right, verse 17. Let's go back to verse 17. Well, so okay, so hold on. I made that point, right? It says, that it was struck with great plagues, but that doesn't mean, like, what does that mean, right? This is why I mentioned very specifically. It was struck with great plagues. We don't know what those plagues were, and we also don't know, right? What the plagues were, and what it is that tells Pharaoh, hey, you know what the problem is? That chick. Like, it's never explained. So again, here's what we don't know. We don't know what the plagues were. We don't know what tips him off that Sarah was the problem, and we don't know what he did with Sarai. So that's the problem. Is we know there was a plague, and somehow, with amongst these plagues, he's like, "Holy crap! That chick is actually his this Abram guy's wife. I better give her back before something worse happens." We have no idea how that transpires. So any other story that people have drawn up where it's like there were spirits and God told him and there were visions and angels and sometimes the hippo is screaming, whatever. It's all Mishnah. We don't know. But the point here is, why would he be in this situation to begin with, right? Like, what was it? Again, I go back to what was his plan? Why would he was so afraid of the world, right? Well, Titan, physically broad language because of Sarah. Well, but it's broad language, right? Well, Mary, again, did she? See, this goes back to, we can only say what's in the text, right? The text just says there were plagues. It was because of Sarah or Sarai, and so he freaks out. Well, we don't know what the plagues were. We don't know how he learned it was because of her, and what it was, because like it would have been just as easy for him to be like, well, then let's kill Abram. Like, again, why? Here's the other question: why doesn't it default to, oh, well, if she's his wife, then I just got to kill him, because that was the thing he was afraid of in the first place. Or they say, it's like, wouldn't that make more sense? Like, well, hey, I gave him a camel. Like, I gave him camels and donkeys and servants for this chick, and now I'm getting plagues. Like, maybe the view was on and they couldn't change the channel. I don't know. But like, I'm getting these plagues because of this. I want that dude dead, right? Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow. So we don't know. But the thing is, he finds out, and really, this is a situation where he should be like, I want him dead. I want his nephew dead. I want his servants dead. I want his dog dead. Like, I mean, like, that's really what the Pharaoh should be like. But he doesn't. He's like, no, just go. Just get out. So that's the interesting question here, is what are we supposed to take from the story? Is it just that it's a story? It's what happened, right? God doesn't really talk about it. God definitely steps in to save him. But are we supposed to take something from this? Now, there are lots of lessons that can be learned. I would point out the one thing he was afraid of, which was the Pharaoh finding out that Sarai was his wife, which is why he lies. That's the one thing he's afraid of, occurs. And nothing happens for it. Like, God steps in to prevent it. Now, here's the question. Would God have, if God was able to step in under those circumstances, could he have not stepped in if Abram, because he's not Abraham yet, if Abram had been honest? Could God have still stepped in? You see, this is where these are questions we're going to need to face as we go throughout the rest of these stories. And when we get to Jacob, right? Rebecca and Rachel. and then their concubines, right? It's like, would there be 12 tribes if we didn't have these other women? Right? It's there's some interesting questions we're going to need to answer, and this is one of them. Is the message here, is the story, is something that God wants us to know, that, hey, if I've called you to do something, I'm looking out for you. Now, it doesn't condemn him going to Egypt because of the famine, right? It doesn't condemn him for that. It certainly seems like God wasn't condoning his behavior either. But he still protected him and got him up out of Egypt. And this is where he goes over to Negev. And what's interesting is he was given right here in verse 16, right? He was given sheep, oxen, donkeys, and male and female servants, and female donkeys and camels. Female servants. One of those female servants is going to end up being the handmaiden. The first time the word handmaiden is used is in his story, right? She comes out of Egypt, a place God didn't ask him to go. He doesn't seem to condemn him going there because there seemed to be legitimate reason. But his behavior, Abram's behavior, because he lied, gets him into trouble with the king of Egypt. We don't know what happened to Sarai, right? It's easy to look at Sarah's behavior throughout the rest of the story and be sort of condemning of her at this, because we'll talk about them. But I gotta ask the question: what happened to her in Egypt? We don't know. It's never confirmed. We don't know. I'm not gonna say anything did happen, but I would imagine, even if nothing was consummated, being taken from your husband to be put into a harem, let's face it was a harem, for the king of Egypt under a lie, I imagine that's got to leave a mark. Also, whatever occurred, again, we don't know, but we don't know what occurred to get her out either. We just know that there were plagues. Maybe maybe even if nothing was consummated, maybe some bad things happened that she had to see to get her out. Because here's the thing. Well, it's entirely possible that she does tell him, but when, right? But that's the point. What were the plagues? We don't know. Whatever it was bad enough for the king of Egypt. Again, this is still early Bronze Age, early to mid Bronze Age. Egypt was a world power. It wasn't what it would be later on, but it was still a world power. And these were people who were apparently used to killing people to get their wives. Whatever happened scared him so bad as to be like, take her, all the crap I gave you, and get out. That tells me something pretty severe went down. Now, do we know what it is? No. I'm just saying, from Sarai's perspective, you got taken from your husband, and your husband's in on it, right? So, but again, it's like, you're taken from your husband's household, your husband's in on it, and by the way, I can't imagine that Sarah was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not worth a couple of donkeys and camels and servants? I mean, that's gotta sting. Like, all of this has to hurt. There's no point of this story that makes you think, yeah, God was like, no. Again, it goes without mention, right? But it's clear God was like, no, you go here. Abraham goes where he's not supposed to. He lies, and God has to bail him out. It's clear that this is not what God wanted him to do. But what's the message, right? Is it honesty is always the best policy? Right? Is it that God can protect you no matter what? Is it that God is going to see his will done despite us? Maybe it's all of the above. Maybe this isn't a story that has one simple answer. Maybe it's just a historical event, and we're just supposed to realize it did happen. That these are that these were human beings. For me, the ultimate takeaway from I don't care which story it is, all throughout the Bible. And notice it's always the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Never Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Joseph. There's reasons for that. There are obvious reasons for that. But I find it very interesting that Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are all liars. They are all thieves. These are all men of questionable moral status in many ways. And yet, God still stands with them because it isn't their righteousness. It is entirely possible the entire message we're supposed to get from the story is look at what kind of a schmuck Abram was. He was so afraid of the world that he lets his own wife go off to somebody else's house, right? And then he takes all the stuff that was given to him for her, and he still takes that out of Egypt with him. He lied, he stole because he was afraid of them. God still protects him though. But my question is, would it have been, and this is the question we don't have an answer for. I'm not even going to try. But this is the question that I have, though, in my head, because I do like to ask these weird questions. What would have happened if he had told him that she was his wife? Right? Like, do they just leave him alone? And he goes and lives the rest of his life like there's no problem? Like, there's no conflict between him and the Pharaoh? Maybe he never, it's like, well, you could point and say, well, maybe Pharaoh doesn't give him all the donkeys and camels and servants. So he's not as blessed by the time he leaves Egypt if he tells the truth. True. But as we just pointed out, one of those female servants ends up being the mother of Ishmael. Like, that's a problem. Is it possible that there's a lot of pain that could have been entirely avoided had Abram, in not just in Abram's life, but in his descendants' life, had he not lied? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It's entirely possible Ishmael's born whether he goes down to Egypt or not. It's entirely possible that Ishmael gets born whether he got servants from Egypt or not. It's entirely possible that everything still plays out, but it's just with a different servant from a different time, different place. But maybe they don't have that particular hand servant. Maybe Sarai isn't maybe she's in a different headspace. Again, let's just point out, right? As I said, what if the Sarai we see for the rest of the story, right? What if it's because of Egypt? What if, because this is a question we never ask, right? Because we want to see the heroes as the heroes. Well, but the point is the biblical heroes are screwed up people. We got to ask questions. What did their sin cause? Is it possible that Sarai came out of Egypt a little different? I'm not saying there was anything consummated or anything like that, but just being told and seeing your husband be like, I'll take this crap and you can have her, just don't hurt me. You tell me that's not going to hurt a little bit, right? You think that's not going to cause Sarai to look at her husband a little differently? And maybe even God. Because remember, when we get, I'm assuming y'all have all read this story. You all know the stories, right? When God's like, hey, next year, Sarah, we're going to name her Sarah. She's going to have a son. She starts laughing in her heart because she's like, there's no way it's going to happen, right? Is it possible that it's because of Egypt? Did Abram at this point, did his fear of the world and the things that he put her through, did it hurt her walk with God? Because now we would look and say, well, hold on, Sarai, it says here plagues. Again, we don't know what those plagues were because of you, and that gets you back, so clearly God was looking out for you. Why would you have how could you have a lack of faith if God clearly intervened in your life to put you where you're supposed to be? So, that's also something we can say. If for Sarah, it's like, you've seen the hand of God too. Don't, why would you have this? But at the same time, it's also possible that because we don't know what the plagues were. We don't know how this played out. She may be like, well, but that may, again, all I'm saying is she may just be like, well, yeah, it occurred, but I was still taken into the house. And what happened to me there happened to me. So again, just questions we need to ask for the rest of the story. The story's there for a reason. Is it to tell us something? Maybe. Is it to teach us something? Maybe. Is it just that it happened? Maybe. Is it also to give us an insight into why these people are doing things the way they are? Are we supposed to be realizing our own flaws and failures in them? I think it's all of the above. For me, I think the failure of Abram in this story is he was so afraid of the world that he didn't do what he was supposed to do. He lied. The consequences of that lie may be greater than what the text tells us explicitly, right? It doesn't explicitly say anything beyond the fact that he got camels and sheep and donkeys and slaves and they kicked him out. Like, that's all we know. We don't know how long he was there. This event could have taken years, could have taken months, could have taken days. We don't know. But what we do know is it occurred. I think, for me, the biggest takeaway is Abram was afraid. God showed him that he had nothing to be afraid of because God was with him. But the consequences of what that fear was, the consequences of what occurs in this story, may be much larger than anything we can even necessarily imagine, right? Again, it's possible we don't get the Ishmaelites. It's possible Sarah's a different person. There's a lot of questions that we have to ask. And this is one of those things where it's like, there's no easy answer. There's no one simple answer. But these are questions we need to ponder so that when it comes time for our lives, when we come to our Egypt, and it's like, man, I could lie. And some people have pointed out that because of the connection Sarai and Abram have, which was listed just, again, not even a full chapter earlier, right? She is kind of technically his sister, and from a legal sense, but it's just that she's also his wife. A lot of people have pointed out, it's like it was a lie of technicality, but it was still a lie. How often do we come to our Egypts and we're asked to lie about who we are because it would make life easier for us? Just saying. That's the story that's what I take out of it from this reading. But you may have other things that you're taking out from your readings. You may be at a different point. Maybe you recognize your Egypt in your life. Maybe you're like, man, I know what that was. For me, it was when I was doing this. I don't know. But we have a lot more to read. And we have a lot more to talk about. This Sunday we're going to go over we're going to go more in depth on the Beatitudes, and then we may even be able to move on to the first of the metaphors. So in Titan, I agree. Like I said, I'm of the if I gun to my head, do I think anything carnal happened to Sarah? No, I don't. Or Sarai, I don't. Whatever the plagues were, I think they were sudden enough and bad enough to make him go, "What just happened?" Okay, so yeah, let me just all right, let me tell you what I think happened. I try to avoid this, or I want to make certain that anytime we come to text, that I show what is the difference between what the text says and what I'm thinking, and show that there is a difference, right? There is a difference, because I think what happens far too often is that people's imaginations and get mixed. It's sort of like their ruminations on something get caught up with the actual text, and then people walk away thinking they're the same thing, right? I want to make sure there's always that discrepancy, but it's like, no, this is what text says. So again, just so that we're 100% clear, the text only says plagues were sent because of Sarah. And then the next thing we know, Pharaoh's yelling at Abram. We don't know what the plagues were. We don't know how long they were there. We don't know what happened to Sarah when she was there. We don't know any of that. My suspicion, however, is that whatever these plagues were, it affects his house, right? Maybe it's a sickness. Maybe it's a number of things. It says plagues, plural. So maybe there was something going on, like a disease, that really freaked people out. Maybe he, as I forget who mentioned it, but maybe his obelisk stopped obelisking. We don't know. We don't know. But it affects the whole house. I would imagine it was a very sudden thing. It really stood out as weird. And before anything could happen with Sarai, like maybe she was there for a few days, nothing had a chance to happen. They were getting her cleaned up and I guess showing her around and whatnot. And then everything happens. It happens so fast that they're all caring for people. So there's no time for anything weird to happen, right? There's no time for carnal stuff. There's just, oh crap, everything's bad. And during this, maybe the Holy Spirit knocks on his head and says, hey, dummy, this all happened when you brought that chick in. Why don't you ask her if something's amiss? And then he goes and's like, hey, this all went sideways when we brought you in here. What happened? What are you not telling me? And she's like, I'm actually his wife. I am technically his sister also, but I'm also his wife. And then that's when he's like, all right, I got to get her out of here. Right? And so that's what I think happened. Do I know that's what happened? No. I don't know that it happened. Do I know nothing carnal happened? No, I don't. I can't assume it did. I can't assume it didn't. All I can know is I don't know. And I'm happy saying I don't know because the text doesn't tell me. Okay, it's not important. I'm trying to come to that point in my life where I'm like, you know what, the text doesn't tell us. Maybe it's not important, because if it was important, it would have told us. So that's just me. And yes, Titan, you are correct. She went into his house on a Tuesday. So see, you have great comments, but what's to search out is a king. It's for a king to search out a matter. But what does searching out this matter mean? Is it whether or not she slept with them? Is it how long she was there? Or is it what we're supposed to learn from it? Searching out a matter, the question is, what are we meant to be? What does this matter mean to be searched out? So that's the other thing, because sometimes you lose the forest for the trees. Just saying. Cheese Freak says, works for me. Carnival was different back in the day. It's because you worked at a carnival. I understand. Carney's little hands. Anyway, all right, guys. We'll see you on Sunday. We're gonna go again. We haven't even left the Beatitudes yet. We're gonna do a deep dive into that. And then Monday's show is going to be really interesting. And hopefully, I can tell you on Sunday that Siri is up and running, and you can. It'll be a one-stop shop for me, and it'll allow y'all to, those are things that you can share and promote and make big, because the world's got to hear the message that we're talking about, right? It's got to know that there are, when people bring up ancient astronaut theory, it's like, hey, you know what? Ancient astronaut theory is a load of crap. We know why, but here's this weird dude on the internet who's telling you why. If you don't believe me, watch these videos. Like, that's what it's going to be. So, like, we got to be able to get that stuff out there to have a voice that is deliberately saying there's a Christian view to this, right? There's a Christian view to all this phenomena. The phenomena means something. And here's somebody saying it and giving you the Christian perspective. So that's what this is all going to be about, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope you all enjoy the videos too. And like I said, hopefully Sunday, that'll be active, and we'll have all the links, all of them. So y'all have a great night, and I will catch y'all on the Flippy Flop.